Hello and welcome everybody to this new chapter of the Freecom tutorial, and today we want to bring the support agents into the game and enable them to reply to customers. And support agents are going to reply to customers using Slack. So what we have to do today is we have to connect the GraphQL backend with the Slack API. If we remember where we left off last time, we implemented the permissions so that users can only access their own conversations, but we can write messages as a customer right now, but they will not be received by a support agent at the moment. So today the goal is that the message that I'm typing right here in the Freecom chat appears in a Slack channel, in a dedicated Slack channel, so that a support agent can reply. And the way how we're going to implement this is by using serverless functions that we can implement directly in the GraphQL console. So what we're going to use is a so-called server-side subscription that we need to set up with our GraphQL backend. And then this subscription fires every time a new message is created, and that message can then be forwarded to the Slack channel. So let's go ahead and start with our first function. I'm navigating to the GraphQL console, and here in the Freecom project I'll go to the functions menu that you can select here in the sidebar. This is the area in our GraphQL console where we can create and manage all our serverless functions. And today we want to create two different kinds of functions. The first one is going to be triggered when a customer initiates a new conversation. So specifically, when the customer presses the new conversation button right here, what we want to happen is we want to create a new Slack channel so that we already have the Slack channel prepared, so that when the user actually starts typing a message into the chat, we already have a Slack channel where we can message or forward this message to. So this is the first function that we're going to write. It's going to be a server-side subscription that is triggered whenever a new conversation is created in the database. And correspondingly, we are going to create a new Slack channel for that in the function. And the second function that we're going to implement is the one for actually forwarding a message. So when a message is saved to the database, we also create a server-side subscription that is going to forward that message to Slack. All right, enough talking. Let's go ahead and write our first function. So there generally are two different kinds of functions. We've got the server-side subscription that we're going to use today, and functions for the request pipeline that you can use to transform and validate mutation payloads. But today we're only going to deal with server-side subscriptions. And for the first function that we're going to implement, the type that is acting as a trigger is going to be the conversation. Because whenever a new conversation is created in the database, we want to make sure that our function is triggered and the Slack channel is created with the Slack API. In the second tab of the pop-up, we can go and define our function. And we have to do two things for that. The first thing is that we write the subscription query. So similar to a subscription on the front end, we also have to write the subscription that should be used to trigger the function. And then on the right side, we can go and actually implement the function that we want to execute every time the subscription fires. Let's now actually write the function. For that, I'm going to switch to the full screen editor. And here on the left side, again, we've got the subscription query. And here's where we can specify some sample input for our function. And then in the middle is where we write the function. And the right here is where we can see the logs. So when we're using console log statements in our function, then we will see these log statements appear on the right here. All right, so let's go ahead and first write the subscription query. And in our case, we are only interested in created mutations. So we only want the function to fire or to be executed when a conversation is created. And then we specify the payload of the subscription. And this is going to be the customer with the name and the number of conversations that the customer currently has. Because this is how we compute the name of the Slack channel that we want to create. We first take the name of the customer and then we add the index for that particular conversation. And we don't need the updated fields in the payload right here. Let's do one quick test run of our function to see what the output looks like at the moment. So I can simply click the test run button down here, and this is where we can see what is happening. So this event thing here represents the event object that is the input to our function. And then down here we can see the logs. So we can see that in fact the data field inside the event object has been printed down here in the logs as well. So here is where we want to implement the actual functionality for our function. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to extract the information from the event that we can then use to compose the name of the Slack channel and use this information again to contact the Slack API. So the way how we are going to do this is by extracting the name of the customer and storing it in customer name. We're also converting it to be lowercase. Then we want to have the number of existing conversations. And then we put these two pieces of information together to create the name of the Slack channel that we're about to create. Next, we're using this information to compose the Slack URL that we're going to send our HTTP request to. So this is the base URL that we're using for the Slack API. And then this is the path that we're using to create a new channel. And then we have to pass two arguments to this call. The first one is our authentication token, and the second one is the name of the Slack channel that we created up there. So we haven't really talked about this token right here and how you can obtain it. So the easiest way for you to get such a token is to create your own Slack team and then go to this website, api.slack.com/custom-integrations/legacy tokens. And this will allow you to issue a token for your Slack team. So here you can simply go ahead and copy this token, and then you can use this token for authenticating yourself with the Slack API. The next step now is to actually go and use the Slack URL that we created right here and use the fetch function to send our HTTP request. However, we're not quite done because the fetch function is not available out of the box. If you want to use fetch in your function right here, you'll have to import the corresponding module, and here we're using the isomorphic fetch. Next, we can test this implementation and see if it actually creates a new Slack channel in our Freecom team. So for that, we have to configure an example event here, and right here I'm just going to use the test username as the customer name that is being provided, and then just a random number that is going to represent the index of the conversation. So if we click the test run button, we expect that a new Slack channel is being created in our Freecom team. So let's move over to the Freecom team right here in Slack. And if we search for the channel test user, this is the channel test user 134 that was just created. Perfect, but we're not quite done with this feature yet, because we also want to notify everybody in the general channel of our Freecom team that a new conversation was created. So we actually want to make it so that a message is sent automatically to the general channel where we mention the new channel that was created, so that the support agents can comfortably click on the new channel and join it right away without having to search it up here. The way how we're going to do this is by implementing a callback using then for our fetch call here. And this is going to look as follows. So we're taking the response of the call to the Slack URL, and then we are parsing it as JSON, and then we're creating the message that we now want to send to the Slack API, and then we'll send the new message as the Freecom bot right here, and then we construct a new URL that we're again going to send using text, and this URL this time uses the chat.postMessage path. And again, we have to pass the token, the username, and the channel and the text as arguments right here. So let's go and try to test this with another channel that we're creating. The function was executed. And we see right here that we received a message in the general channel exactly as expected that now allows us to click on the test user's channel and we can join the conversation right away. Fantastic. Next, we want to go and see if that functionality works in the React application that we're building. So for that, we first have to go and save the function from our editor. First, we have to give a name to the function. Now we can save it. And now we can see whether it actually works in our React application as well when we're creating a new conversation. So back to our React app, let me refresh the page and go and initiate a new conversation. In fact, I think this was already created before, so let's just try and create one more so that we make sure that a mutation was actually fired. And now in the general channel, we see that this is the 5th conversation of the current customer. So now we can move on and implement the second function that we need, where we want to forward the messages from the React app to Slack. So let's create our second function, which again is a server-side subscription, but this time we want to fire it whenever a new message is created. Let's therefore adjust the subscription query right here. So we first have to go and say that we're only interested in created mutations. And then we have to update the payload of the subscription query as well. Specifically, we need to make sure that it contains 3 bits of information. The first one, of course, is the text of the message so that we can send it along when we contact the Slack API. The second one is the name of the customer, and that we can retrieve through the conversation relation. So we need the name of the customer to know which Slack channel we should send it to. And likewise, we also need the Slack channel index of the current conversation. So this is the information that we're going to use to compose the Slack channel name that we need to provide when we want to post a message through the Slack web API. And then we also need the username, so the customer name, which we already have right here. So these are the 3 bits of information that we need in our subscription payload and that we're going to use to create the message in the Slack API. First, we have to make sure that this information is properly retrieved from the event input right here. And the first thing that we're going to retrieve is the text of the message. So we just go through the data object and the message node, and that's how we can obtain the text. Then the customer name we get from the conversation customer name path. And then we can compose the Slack channel name using the customer name and the Slack channel index. And then finally, we can also send this emoji along, and this is going to represent, or it's going to show up along with a message that is posted in the Slack channel. So now, similar to what we did before with the conversation, with the function where we created the conversation, we are composing our Slack URL right here with the same base URL that we saw before. We're using the chat.postMessage path, and then we're providing our arguments like the channel where we want to post it to, the username, and the text and the emoji. So that's all we have to do here. The last thing is that we again need to import the isomorphic fetch library so that we're able to send this fetch call right here. But this is all we have to do. So let's go and try to send a test message. We can therefore again specify some sample data right here. So let's take the same customer that we were using before, the test user, and then the conversation 135 that we created when we were testing the conversation functionality. So let's go ahead and do a test run, and we expect that this text is going to be posted to the channel that we created before. So we forgot to define the token, so let's change that real quick. I'm just going to copy the token again from here. And rerun the function. And let's head over, and we see that a new message has been posted in the channel, and this is the question mark emoji that I was mentioning before. Really nice. So we are now actually able to send Slack messages through these functions that we're defining in the GraphQL console. However, we need to add one minor bit of functionality right here, because there is actually a little gotcha with the subscription that we defined. It's not only going to be called for customers, but also when agents are sending new messages, this subscription is also going to be called. And we kind of want to distinguish the cases when the message was sent by a customer and by an agent. In fact, when the message was posted by an agent, we still want to go and post it to Slack, but then in the name of the agent that posted it. And the reason for that is that the agents are going to use a / command in the Slack channel. And that means that the message that they're posting is only visible to them. So let's assume that agent A posts a message in a Slack channel, then agent B, who is part of the Slack channel, is not going to be able to see it because agent A used the / command. And the way how we are going to solve this situation is by simply reposting it as a generic message sent by the agent into the Slack channel manually. So we have to distinguish the case between whether the message was sent by an agent or not. And for that, we simply include the agent field and the Slack username of that agent in the subscription payload as well. So now we can clearly distinguish whether the message that was created by an agent or by a customer. If it was created by a customer, then this agent field here in the payload will be null. So it will basically look like this. This is the case where we can be sure that it was posted by a customer. And we only have to do 2 minor changes in our current implementation for that. So the first one is that we actually make sure that the username either is the username of the agent, if it exists, or the username of the customer that we retrieve right here. So we can use this and replace the customer name in the URL with the username variable that we're defining up here. And then also the emoji we want to set depending on whether that message was sent by an agent or not. So if it was sent by an agent, then we're using the telephone receiver emoji, and otherwise the question. All right, let's do another test run with the same test user as before. Let's see if our implementation still works. And here is the second message that we received. Amazing. So what's left to do for us is test if that functionality actually works in our Freecom React application. So let's go and save our function and see if it actually works when we're using it from inside our React app. So again, let's go and create a new conversation, write hello, and now move over to Slack, where we first see that this message was sent in the already existing Brooke Turner Song 5 conversation right here. And if I were to go and create a new Slack channel, a new conversation, write a message right here, then we'll get another notification in the general channel that this message or the channel was created. And in here, we also get the message. All right, that's it already for today's Freecom chapter. If you're now wondering how the agents can respond to the customers through Slack, we're going to share that in a separate resource with you, so stay tuned about that. And the way how this is going to be solved in general is that we have to use a function as a service provider, and you could use, for example, Google Cloud Functions or AWS Lambda for this. In our case, we're going to use a service that is called stdlib, and that we're going to use to set up a microservice, basically a small function where every time the agents want to respond to a customer, they're using the / command. The content of the message is going to be forwarded to that function, and that function simply triggers a mutation in the GraphQL backend. So this is how we are going to implement the other direction of communication, so agents talking to customers. But for now, we're all set with the first direction, which is customers writing to agents. I really hope you enjoyed learning about serverless functions and how you can extend the functionality of a GraphQL backend. And stay tuned for the next and last chapter, where we are going to talk about file management. And as usual, if you have any questions, check out our documentation or join our growing community on Slack.